Hello and welcome back to the NUFC Opinion Blog for another fan feature interview. Today I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, a very long time friend of mine, Alex Todd. Alex, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Daniel. How are you?
Absolutely fine. So to kick things off straight away, Sunday's game against West Brom was poor in every sense of the word. What do you think went wrong?
Well, I think it was a lack of optimism and ambition, really. The formation when I first saw the starting lineup didn't exactly fill us with confidence. I think we started without a recognised striker. And I mean, don't get us wrong, I actually think Joe Linton was probably our best player, but
Yeah.
I think there wasn't really any impetus to actually go out there and get anything from the game. I think there was one or two positives. I thought Dummett came back in. I thought he played well, but in terms of the way we went out to play, I don't think we were um, really looking to get anything from the game. But I think a draw for West Brom was probably a worse result than it was for us. But even then, I think it's definitely a game we should have been trying to
Oh,
win.
most certainly, yes. Didn't exactly feel, as you say, with much confidence. Leading into our next game, which is Aston Villa on Friday, who have had a surprisingly good season. They've done really quite well. How do you see that one going?
I think it's going to be a really tough test. I think they're pretty much the opposite of what we are at the minute. They're trying to go out and put every single team they're up against to the test, and I think it's going to be a difficult game. They've got plenty of good players. Obviously, Grealish, Watkins, brilliant attacking force, and they're solid at the back as well. And obviously, with us having San Maximan, Almiron, Wilson all out, it's going to be a big challenge to get something out of it.
With that being said, and of course with the whole situation we're in at the moment at the bottom end of the table, do you think that we will survive the season and we'll get out of this mess?
Well, it's difficult to say at the moment. I think obviously Fulham are a team which are very much on the up at the minute. I think, if I'm being honest, I think they will overtake us at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at the other teams around us. I think Brighton at the moment are playing really poorly. I think we've actually overtaken them in the league,
We
which is
have,
good. And I
yeah,
think staying ahead of Brighton is probably more of a goal that we need to be looking at than keeping Fulham below us, because
yeah.
Fulham are a team which I think, especially in the way they play, are much better than us at the moment.
No, I agree, and especially considering we play Brighton in a couple of weeks' time, I think that game takes on huge significance when we get to that. If we can get a result out of that, I think that could be absolutely monumental
Yeah,
in,
definitely.
in staying up. Moving on to some more positive memories about Newcastle United. Can you recall your earliest memory supporting the club?
I can recall my earliest game I've been to. It was a friendly against Sampdoria in 2007. I
Wow.
remember it was an extremely hot day, and I think most of the crowd had the shirts off. And I remember it was an Alan Smith header which won it 1-0. I think it was the only goal he ever scored for the club.
Yeah,
Actually,
he
it was
certainly never scored a competitive goal for Newcastle from what I can remember.
yeah, that was my earliest memory, and I've had loads of brilliant memories supporting the club. I mean, obviously, I went to quite a lot of the Europa League games when we got into the Europa League. The Benfica game was probably one of my best memories, actually. Although we did get knocked out,
Mm-hmm.
it was a brilliant atmosphere. And plenty of Premier League games as well. I mean, the one that sticks in my mind the most was the 5-1 win against Spurs at home. Um,
Ah, yes.
although we'd actually been relegated by this point, it was just brilliant to watch. I mean, it was one goal after the other, um, and especially with a crowd willing Rafa to stay as well. It was a brilliant.
I remember that game very well. Yeah. Well, just moving on to favorite memories. Do you have a particular favorite memory?
Well, I
Like,
think that one would probably have to be up there. I mean, it would have been an even better memory if we hadn't have already been relegated. But yeah, that would definitely have to be up there. I mean, there's plenty of other games as well. I mean, just going back to the Europa League, I think it was Angie Makashkala that we played.
mm,
And I remember, I'm sure it was Papi Cisse scoring
yeah,
in the last minute,
90s.
and then
Yeah.
he threw himself into the crowd. That was probably up there as well. But yeah, loads of brilliant memories. I've not actually been to a game for a long time now, to be honest. Obviously, last year with COVID and everything, but the most recent game was Oxford in the Cup last year, which wasn't exactly a
No, it wasn't a
classic.
classic
But
at all. It was awful.
yeah, loads of brilliant memories supporting the club.
With that, are there any particular players that you perhaps idolized during your time supporting the club?
Well, obviously, growing up, the only real golden generation, I suppose, was the 11-12
Yeah.
season squad. And I think, obviously, Bar, Cisse, Ben Arfa, Cabaye, all brilliant players.
Brilliant team. What a team.
Yeah, but one of the players which always sticks out in my mind as being a brilliant player, and one which I think I wouldn't say he went under the radar as such, but Stephen Taylor was a fantastic player, and I think, especially, I've just got so many memories of him, especially I think it was Stoke who were playing with a free
The
kick.
antics,
Yeah,
with the keeper. I
but
remember that.
although he does get remembered for that kind of thing, he was a really good player. I think, to be honest, that season, the 11-12, I think he got injured, and I think he was definitely on the way to an England call-up, to be honest. I think he was playing
Yeah.
absolutely brilliantly that season. Also, I loved, I know you loved him as well, Jonas
Oh, you
Gutierrez. He was
can't
a
not love
brilliant
that
player.
man. Can't not love the
Um,
man.
I think especially in the championship and the season we came up, and also the 11-12 season as well, he was brilliant.
One of the unsung players of that 11-12 team, I think.
Definitely, yeah.
No, I think he was brilliant. And of course, no one can ever forget saving us from relegation with that goal
Exactly,
against
yeah.
West Ham. Coming back from Kansas, it shows the true measure of the man. About Newcastle United in general now, moving away from just specific players, what makes the club so special to you?
Well, for me, it's the I think there's a few different things. One, with the stadium in particular being where it is in the center of the city, you can't go into the city without, in some way, being connected to the stadium and being connected to the club. And I think as soon as I well, the very first time I set foot in the stadium, I knew it was the club that I wanted to support, and obviously I didn't really have much of a choice with my dad supporting them, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the main thing. I think the other thing is just the fans. I mean, you go, obviously, I know at the moment we haven't got fans in the stadium, but as soon as you set foot in the stadium, you could just hear the roar and the cheer of the crowd, and it's a brilliant experience being in the ground.
Mm. No, I fully agree. I can remember just the first time you see the green pitch and you see the stands, and it is quite a moving moment. Just to sort of sum things up a little bit. Obviously, at the moment, as we mentioned, Newcastle are not in a good way at all, both on and off the pitch. So, with that being said, what would you hope the future of Newcastle United would look like?
Well, obviously the takeover. I think, in all honesty, the only way we are going to move forward as a club is if that happens. Um, I would love. I don't really expect us to be, challenging for Champions Leagues, Europa Leagues. All I want to see is the club have a little bit of ambition. Trying to go out, trying to win every game, at least trying to make some form of progress. And whether or not that results in, as I say, Champions League, Europa League, whatever, it doesn't. I don't really care about that. It's just stagnating and trying to stay in the league every year is not really what the club should be about. We should be at least, I think, challenging for top 10 would be the season on season would be what I would like to see. But I mean, obviously, you see plenty of people saying we expect Champions Leagues, Europa Leagues. We don't. We just expect to
Not
have
at
a
all.
club with a little bit of, ambition, and that's what I would
Mhm.
like to see from the club.
I often sort of it obviously being someone like Manchester City, winning all these trophies with all that money, it would be fantastic, and no one can ever disagree with that. But I think if anything, the club that you'd potentially want to model is someone like Leicester City,
Yeah,
because that's a club, and no disrespect to Leicester, but if you look at their history and their fan base, they're not as big a club as Newcastle. But what they've done is they've started in small foundations and they've built and built and built, and obviously they won the league potentially in a very much a lucky sort of fluky sense, if that is perhaps the way of looking at it. But from winning that league, they haven't just stopped. I know they haven't won anything since, but every year since they've tried to challenge again and they've tried to stay in that. And they've appointed Brendan Rodgers, who's a good manager, and they've brought in some brilliant players along with veterans like Jamie Vardy, etc. And I just think they're a club that the fans can really be proud of. So for Newcastle, looking forward, in my sense, that's the sort of hopes that I would say. Obviously, you mentioned the takeover there. Do you think it'll happen? And if you don't, do you think that's something that someone else would come in, or do you think anything else might ever happen?
it's difficult to say. I mean, it's been nearly a year now since the whole thing started. I think if I'd like to think it will happen eventually, but I think if it is going to happen, it's going to be quite a long time before it does. Obviously, with all the legal cases going on, um, yeah, I think it's going to be difficult. But I do think with previous so-called takeovers, there's been a bit of not jeopardy, but a kind of skepticism around whether or not Ashley wants to sell the club. I think this
Mm-hmm.
time he genuinely does want to sell the club. Um, I think I'd like to think it will still happen, but I think it's a hell of a long way off yet if
Yeah.
it is going to happen.
Do you? Because some people have voiced their concerns about, say, the Saudis and sort of their reputation as people and the regime that they employ. Is that something that concerns you, or is it merely a footballing and economic matter in terms of promoting the city of Newcastle?
It's difficult to say. I mean, obviously, a lot of people at the time voiced their concerns about where the money would be coming from. But obviously, with the UK government, they do plenty of deals with the Saudis, and obviously the Queen's been pictured with the Saudis as well. I mean, it's difficult to, on one hand, say all that, and on the other hand, say that they shouldn't be taking over the club. But yeah, I mean, there are obviously concerns, but I think the only way that the Saudis are going to improve their reputation and try and, put right the wrongs which they certainly have done in the past, is by trying to move more into the current century. Trying investing in things like football clubs. Obviously, there's plenty of sponsorships in other sports. I mean, Aramco, I think, is the main sponsor of Formula One, so it's good enough for them. So if it's good enough for them, then why not for us?
Exactly. No, I agree. They promote boxing as well. Obviously, there's been many fights over there, but yeah, we shall see what happens. We can hope. Alex, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate that.
No bother.
The fan feature will be back next week, as it always is. And as I say, that just leaves me to say thank you all very much for watching. And how are the lads?